Can tell election season is approaching if we're speaking more and more to the IEC now. Participating in next year's elections could be more expensive. The Independent Electoral Commission is considering increasing fees for parties and individuals who will be on the ballot paper come 2024. For more on these proposed costs, we're joined by former IEC Chairperson Tselane, who joins us virtually. Chairperson, thank you so much for your time this evening. We're expecting an influx of these so-called independent candidates. Why does that make it more costly to run an election in 2024?
Thank you very much for having me. Firstly, we've got to clarify the importance of the deposit that political parties and independents we have to pay. What is the function thereof? And then we must see also in line with the requirements for a party to participate in the electoral process, because as you may recall, recently when the legislation was passed, it was indicated that the political party or an independent that would want to participate in the elections would have to get 15% of what it would have required for a political party to get a seat in the previous elections. And in certain instances, a political party or an independent would then therefore require almost 13,000 signatures. Now, if you look at that, as well as the deposit, the intention is to make sure that you do not have frivolous participants taking part in the elections, because that could create a situation where a ballot paper has become so big that it becomes unwieldy, and it defeats the whole purpose of having to have a democratic process.
Now, some would criticize you and say this is what in Afrikaans they'd called a wegjaarprys. You know, if this becomes a barrier to entry, like you said, you don't want frivolous entries into the realm of the elections. But what about the criticism that it's an unfair treatment that will keep people from taking part in the democratic process?
Well, firstly, I agree that there is a need for a certain amount of deposit to be paid as a deterrent for those who are frivolous participants. But at the same time, the amount should not be exorbitant to the extent that it does not, or it prohibits participation in the electoral processes. So, in my opinion, the fact that there is already a requirement of so many signatures, particularly for your independent candidates, who will be entering the space for the first time. That process is so onerous and complex as it is, and that now putting a deposit at a higher level would actually make it extremely difficult for them to participate in the electoral process. So I would have thought that for independents particularly, they would have to pay the same amount that a ward candidate would have to pay, which is, I think, around 1,000 rands, as in the previous elections.
Now, let's talk numbers. I believe from what I've read that political parties can expect to pay 300,000 rand to contest the national elections and all the regional polls. That's quite an increase. That's looking at around 100,000 rand increase. What are some of the other numbers that are being put on the table?
Well, it's an area where I differ with the Electoral Commission. But fortunately, because they've opened this up for conversation and for people to make submissions, hopefully they'll be able to listen to some of the submissions that will be coming from different quarters. In my opinion, the amount that should be there, it's the amount that was there previously, because the IEC, even though in their statement they're saying they've taken into consideration inflation, the truth of the matter is that inflation plays no role in this instance, because once a political party has gotten a seat, that party will receive back its deposit. So the independents at the same time. So the IEC does not really use the money for any trading purposes, and therefore inflation is not applicable in this case.
Look, at the same time, it costs money to run, especially a free and fair and structurally sound election. Are you getting enough money as the IEC to do that properly? Because we do know when it comes election day, we still see those massive gaps in inequality in terms of where people are voting. Some people are voting in a hall that's nice and warm. Others are voting in tents and that kind of thing. Are you getting enough money, Mr. Chairperson, or former Mr. Chairperson?
I wanted to clarify that, to say that I'm not the spokesperson of the IEC. I used to be with the IEC. Now speaking on behalf of IMSA, or the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa. But look, the IEC does have sufficient resources, but I don't think it's sufficient enough for the IEC to be able to do all sorts of things that it needed to do, particularly voter education. And we're entering into a very complex era of coalitions. And I think it's important, especially with also the independents coming in, it is important that there is more allocation to the IEC in order to enable the IEC to be able to play its role properly within the society.
So this is all part of a raft of proposed regulations as being open to the public. And some of those regulations speak to the procedures around allowing South Africans to register and vote outside of the country. This is always a major talking point. And of course, I'm sure you have also noticed, you know, week in and week out, we get stories of the large number of South Africans who have moved abroad for various reasons. Did you think there was a need for this process to be simplified or changed?
There is a need for the process to be simplified and also to be clarified, particularly, as I've indicated, following the Constitutional Court judgment. The independents now are going to be participating at both national and provincial level, and it is for the first time that they'll be participating at this level. So because of that, the IEC had to create regulations that would then govern the relationship between those independents and all other electoral processes that are in place. And then some of the regulations are basically aimed at ensuring that that aspect is attended to.
Before I let you go, we're talking to you because of this proposed increase in how much it'll take to take part in the elections. But when you look into your looking glass ahead to the 2024 elections, you spoke about how you're expecting more coalition politics to enter the fray. We really can't understate the importance of the work of the IEC and the need for them to really get it right in 2024, because the magnifying glasses will definitely be out more than we've ever seen before.
Absolutely. It's going to be quite critical for the IEC to make sure that it's ready to manage process, particularly two main areas that I think are likely to be a major source of difficulties for the IEC. Firstly, it is the management of the logistics, including the production of the ballot papers. But secondly, making sure that the electoral staff understand the new processes, understand the legislation, and apply the law evenly.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. As always, former IEC Chairperson Tselane joining us virtually there and giving us some important insight.